it can be really hard to navigate family of origin issues because there's so much emotion wrapped up in your relationships with your family, and particularly your parents and your siblings or anybody that was around when you were growing up. So, but it makes it that much more important that you stay intentional about your own growth as it relates to those relationships. Because here's the hard truth that I don't know that a lot of people talk about, and that is that if you want to get to be the person that you want to be, the person that is totally fulfilled, the person that has, is living a life of purpose, is perhaps living a creative life, is has enough rest, has enough joy, laughs a lot, that version of yourself that you see in your mind can only come into fruition by you facing all of the things that take you out of that version of yourself. That means that anything that triggers you, anything that pulls you out of a state of joy, love, peace, is the thing that needs focusing on. And so oftentimes it's our family that triggers us the most. And so those relationships, those familial relationships, are the ones that can actually help us the most if we know what to do with them. The problem is that most people don't even know what to do about those relationships. So that's why we come to this conversation about cutting people out. And it's sort of become this, like, I don't know, cool thing to cut your family out of your life. And I think that if you are in a dangerous situation, then, you've got to do what is best for you. But most of the time, it's really just that we have trauma from our parents and we don't know how to navigate it. And so we end up in this place where we have so much anger and so much resentment towards them that we end up either deciding to cut them out or thinking about cutting them out. And I'm not a big proponent of that because, again, if you want to get to the version of yourself that you see, that's only an image in your mind that isn't a reality, that version of you who is super confident, who is living the life that they want to live, who is living their dream, who feels purposeful, who feels fulfilled, who feels rested, who feels like they're using their talents and their creativity to create a beautiful life for themselves. If you want to get to that version of yourself, it actually means developing the tools and the skill sets so that you can stand in a room with the people that trigger you the most and not feel any trigger. And as a matter of fact, at some point, you get to a place where you feel only love. And that's a journey, but you've got to want that version of yourself so, so badly. You've got to be so tired of the version of yourself that feels angry, that feels sad, that feels afraid. And you've got to be ready to take small steps towards that version of yourself because the change, becoming that person, becoming that version of yourself, everybody says it starts with you, and it actually starts and ends with you. It starts and ends with you making the changes that you need to make, but where it really starts is the radius right around you. The people that you have familial relationships with, the people that you have the most historical trauma with. And it is with those people that the real hard work starts because it's with those people that you experience the hardest part of the journey. And it is hard, but it's a lot harder when you are resisting the experience and not understanding that it is happening for you so that you can get to the most powerful, most empowered version of yourself, which is the one that you envision. That road was never meant to be an easy road. Getting to that version of yourself was never meant to be an easy road because that version of yourself can handle so much. That version of yourself is super confident and super secure. But you know what that also means is that she or he has gone through a shit ton of stuff and navigated a lot, gained a lot of tools along the way so that they know how to handle things when things go sideways. So, I invite any questions. And okay, Courtney said, I set a boundary with my sister in regards to my daughter with autism. We don't talk now. Well, if you'd like to share the boundary, then we can talk a little bit more about that. It sounds like you're sad that you don't talk now. And perhaps there's some further insight that we can help you with. Um, So yeah, because I think that one of the things about boundaries and the reason why we get to this conversation about cutting people out of our lives is because when we say we set a boundary with somebody, what we really mean is that we set a rule for them to follow and they didn't follow it. And so then we can't have them in our lives because they didn't follow the rule. What this also means, another way of saying this, is that you've expressed to somebody, you've told somebody how you expect to be treated, or you've told somebody what you expect out of their behavior and they didn't do it. That's what a lot of people think a boundary is. That's an incorrect definition of a boundary. And you know what that's 100% of the time going to lead to? Suffering and probably cutting people out of your life unnecessarily, which creates suffering for you. So that's what we can talk a little bit more about. Okay. Okay, so Courtney, she was screaming, spanking her 7-year-old while my daughter was sitting right next to them. Okay. She is super sensitive and get overstimulated easily. I asked her not to do that in front of her. Okay. Anything else? Okay, Christy, we're going to talk about that. Why don't people follow the boundaries? What does that say about them? It's not about them, my dear. It's not about them at all. It's about you. People don't follow boundaries because people don't follow rules. That's not an empowering way of building relationships with people. She completely cut ties with me, said I was overreacting. Okay. So in this particular case, I can see where you are coming from. However, here's the thing about boundaries, my dears. Let's get one thing straight about boundaries first. At the point at which you're setting boundaries with somebody is a point at which they've already demonstrated that they can't hear you. They're not the person in your life that's going to hear you. That's why they're so effective with family, because for many people that have grown up in scenarios where there is trauma in the family, where there's generational trauma, where we really weren't taught how to feel our feelings or how to express things. I think oftentimes what happens, especially if we're on this healing journey, this journey of becoming or the spiritual journey, we try to express to our parents and siblings things that we would like to see change. We try to express preferences in their behavior, and we feel like it's justified because here we are trying to be mature about expressing ourselves in a calm and compassionate manner. And the other person is unable to hear us. And it feels very confusing. But what's happening is even when you express something like that, and even if you express it in a mature, calm, compassionate way, it doesn't mean the other person has the skill to receive that message. So that means that it's not up to them to change because they're on their own journey, learning their own lessons in their own time. The reality for you is they can't hear me. Now, there's hard feelings that come up based on that, and that's something that I talk about a lot, and we'll see if we talk about that this evening, but for now, I'm going to stick with this example. It is your responsibility to feel those hard feelings that come up for you based on the fact that your sister couldn't hear you. And then it is up to you. It is your responsibility to decide how you and your daughter engage with her. It doesn't mean that we have to never see each other again. What it means is that you get to be empowered in the decision-making process of how you engage. So let me give you some examples. I only see my sister in group family settings. I only talk to my sister over the phone. My sister doesn't stay alone with my daughter. I don't go over to my sister's house with my daughter. These are all examples of boundaries. Because again, the boundary is set when the person has already demonstrated that they're incapable of hearing you. And a lot of times what that happens is when the person, when that happens and the person demonstrates that they're incapable of hearing me. And what I mean by incapable of hearing me, what that looks like in reality is that they probably blame you. They probably play the victim. They probably tell you you're making it up. They probably tell you you're overreacting like your sister did. They might get really defensive. Like those are all examples of how somebody is not ready to receive what you're saying to them. So a lot of times when somebody reacts that way, we get upset, but then we still try. Like we try to push it. We try to like tell it to them a different way or give them a different example or like we keep trying, and it's okay to try once or twice. But once this person has demonstrated that they're not going to be able to hear you because they're not at the maturity level, the emotional maturity level to be able to receive what you're saying and be able to make the changes you're asking for. Doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It doesn't mean that they don't love you. It doesn't mean that they don't want a relationship with you. It doesn't mean that they don't care. It means that that's not where they're at on their journey. That lesson they're not ready for yet. So your responsibility is not to change where they're at, not to force anything, but to decide, okay, my boundary, which is my promise to myself, is X, Y, Z. Again, my promise to myself. Me and my daughter don't go over to my sister's house. I only talk to my sister over the phone. My daughter doesn't stay alone with my sister. These are examples of boundaries. Do you notice how in all of those examples, those are all things that you can control? None of those examples require her to change anything. See, because it's not when you try to write rules for people, like this is a great example. And I appreciate your example and I'm using it as an example and I hope that's okay since you shared it, but it's a great example because what we often try to do is we set boundaries and we say like, okay, we tell the person don't do this. Seems reasonable to us, right? It seems like it should be pretty easy for them to not do this thing that I'm asking them to do. It doesn't mean it's easy for them. And when we try to set rules for other people and determine how people behave around us, what that actually is doing for you is just adding to the responsibility that you are taking on to monitor their behavior. And whenever you're monitoring an adult's behavior in that way, there can't possibly be peace in that relationship because you're constantly looking out. You're constantly trying to make sure they're following the rule. Did they follow the rule I set? It's not going to bring anything but suffering to you. This is why we make promises to ourselves. This is why we focus solely on what we can control. We do not focus on what the other person is in control of, which is their behavior. And believe it or not, this is the more empowering place because at that point, you're not asking for any change. You're not asking for them to change in order for you to feel at peace. What you're actually doing is saying, I'm going to make sure that I feel at peace no matter what. So you do you do whatever you need to do. And I'm going to make sure that I'm at peace through my own behavior and my own decisions. It's empowering. It's an empowering way to live within a relationship where you can't be where you're not going to be fully seen, heard, and understood. And by the way, the vast majority of relationships in your life, you're not going to be fully seen, heard, and understood. These relationships with family tend to be the hardest ones, but it's very few people, less than 5 people in your whole life will be able to see, hear, and understand you in the way that you want. And even those 5 people will let you down because they won't always be able to see, hear, and understand you. But again, the people that we have the shared trauma with, parents and siblings and other relationships that you grew up with, that you have shared trauma with, those are the hardest ones. So I hope that that makes sense. And I answered your question, Christy. Okay. I don't like getting my brother-in-law fast food when I'm driving and run errands because he does nothing for anyone else in the family, and then he always complains it's cold or something's wrong. Okay, so don't. That's something you can control. Um, yeah, lasagna. Second, okay, so you said first, I don't do that, and second, you told him yes without asking me, and then I told her that shows how little respect she has for me, and then she guilt tripped me. Okay, what that tells me is that you got kind of angry at her. Well, so first of all, what I'm hearing is that was that your mother-in-law? Did I read that right? Your mother-in-law told him that you would buy him food. Is that correct? And when you said that you wouldn't? Okay, so you have some anger and frustration to feel, my dear. That is your responsibility. I think even just your sentence shows how little respect she has for me. That's you creating a story in your head about how she feels about you because you're angry at her. See, often what we do when we feel these hard feelings related to family is then we go back to these stories in our head. It's quite probable that that sentence is not the first time that you felt disrespected by her. It's quite probable that that is a narrative that you've been um, noodling around for probably many years, and you have probably a lot of examples. Um, and so again, it's not your responsibility to change how what she does. It's just your responsibility to make further promises about how you engage with her. Okay, Courtney, it's just unfortunate because she's 11 years older than me and I'm always the bigger person. I know, and guess what? You got feelings to feel about that, don't you? So this is why I also talk about the feeling of feelings in this. So maybe we'll come back to that. Um, oh, lasagna. So how do I deal with that? I told her I just won't be shopping. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. I mean, I just can't make anyone happy. I don't think that she's trying to guilt trip you. I can understand why it would feel that way when she said that. But I think that's probably her own feelings coming up, her own frustrations coming up, because you don't know why she did. She might have like people-pleasing tendencies, and so but that's not, it's like you're making up a story, but like she has a different experience than whatever your story is. And it's probably not that, oh, I just don't respect that person. It's like her experience is probably more like perhaps she's trying to make everybody happy, or she's trying, like whatever. I don't know her situation, but I'm saying that's not even your problem. Your problem is not at all your responsibility has nothing to do with how she's feeling. Your responsibility is all about your feelings and making sure that you're showing up for your feelings. Okay. Yeah, purple hearts. So, and like whenever somebody says those things, it's coming from their own wounding. Um, and so your responsibility again has to do with how that makes you feel. It probably didn't feel very good. It feels manipulative, right? whenever somebody says something or does something that feels manipulative, it's actually their wounding. So, but that, like, explanation isn't gonna feel like enough until you feel your hard feelings about it. Okay, I'm trying to catch up on the, um Yari, that's not exactly a boundary, but I hear what you're saying. You gotta frame it more in. First of all, it's got to be specific. Boundaries have to be specific. Did you hear what I said with Chrissy's example? Or sorry, was it Chrissy or was it Courtney? Um, the example about the sister. It's they've got to be specific to that person, and they've got to be all about what you can control. So you could say something like, if somebody raises their voice at me, if this person raises their voice at me, then I walk away, right? That's a boundary. It's an example. So we don't, Christy, so we don't ask, we just remove ourselves or do what is best for us for that specific situation. Yeah. Uh, okay. So you can ask for the change. I think oftentimes it's good to ask for the change because just for our own growth journey, it's helpful that we start to sort of face some of those fears of expressing ourselves. So, but what I'm saying is that when you've asked and somebody's demonstrated a few times that, they're not really capable of meeting you there, then it's not anymore up to them to change. It's up to you to change because your change needs to be feeling the hard feelings about the fact that they can't do what you want them to do, and then figuring out what the boundary is for you to feel more comfortable in that relationship. Feel like that's gonna feel like you have a little bit more, you feel more empowered in that relationship. And guess what? This actually um results in much more authentic relationships because what's happening is we're giving too much of our energy towards relationships that are not the ones that are the most enriching. And it's and so there's these old expectations, especially with parents and siblings and people, people that we have shared trauma with from people from our family of origin. There's this, you know, there's how should I say it? There are habits that we have adopted over the years or that just even since childhood. I mean, we're full grown adults, and it might mean that it might be that you're still kind of doing the things that were expected of you as like a teenager or something, right? Like reacting the same way, still going to all the family functions, like whatever it is, you're doing these things that are just kind of expected. And so in doing so, you're not really updating the relationship to be authentic to who you are now. And as an individual, we have just like a certain amount of energy that we can expend within relationship with other people. And so if you're spending so much time trying to like navigate these relationships of origin that are probably not, they probably weren't ever the ones that were the most enriching, the most nourishing, the most, healing ones because they're the ones that caused the trauma in the first place. But you're spending so much time trying to like force them to be the healing relationships that you want them to be instead of realizing that their role isn't to be those relationships for you. Their role is not to be the relationships where you feel seen, heard, and understood. Their role is actually to teach you the lesson about how to be authentically yourself, how to set boundaries, which is make promises to yourself. And you know what? When you do start making new promises to yourself, like I said with the other example, with the sister, like let's say you've now set boundaries of like I only text with my sister, or I don't go over my sister's house, or I my daughter doesn't go over my sister's house or something like that. Pick any of those. Guess what? Your sister might try to push back on that. She might start to be like, "Why aren't you coming over? Why don't you wanna come over? Why don't you wanna bring your kid over? Why aren't you answering the phone?" That's part of the journey because, ooh, now you're changing your behavior. You're no longer asking them to change their behavior. You're changing your behavior. This means that you're taking back your power. And that's going to cause them discomfort, which is again why you need a tool to feel your feelings. And because their discomfort will probably create hard feelings for you. You might start to feel a little guilty. You might start to feel a little anxious and scared about it. And that's normal. That's part of the process. Okay, Lasagna said, yes, my mother-in-law. We have talked about I don't like doing it before, so she knows that, right? I love her so much too. Oh, well, that's sweet. Well, yeah, then it's kind of like think about it. Think about what what promise you could make to yourself to that's not asking her to change anything. Because if you've expressed it a few times and she's still not doing it, then what is the behavior that you need to change? What do you need to change in how you're interacting with that relationship? Okay, good, Lasagna. I'm so happy. I hope that that helps. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Chrissy, for sharing the live. Thank you, Sunny, for sharing the live. Did you guys have questions on that? Or I think it was Courtney's example from earlier, but I don't know if she's still here. So let me know if you guys had questions on that. Um, okay, so I think that Sonico said if I could set a boundary, it would be you can have your beliefs, but don't speak to me in that way. But that's not a boundary because see how you're trying to control what they do? So, if they're speaking to you in a certain way like that you don't like, if they're raising their voice or if they're kind of talking kind of condescendingly or something, then that's a good time for you to decide what you're gonna do. Like if this person, and again, boundaries are specific to the person. Boundaries are specific to the person. So if there's a particular person in your life that is speaking a certain way to you, then figure out and maybe you've asked them to change that and they haven't, then figure out what you're going to do. If they speak to you in a certain way, what are you going to do? Walk away? Hang up the phone? You have that power. See, we get so caught up in the fact that we like can't control the other person's behavior because we want them to act the way that we want. Why do we do that? Because we're actually really scared of losing the relationship because when they don't do what we want, we think, well, now the only option is cutting them out. It's like a very black and white thinking. Do you see how it's very black and white thinking when somebody doesn't do what we want them to do? We think sometimes they're not respecting my boundary. If you ever think they're not respecting my boundary, then you're not setting boundaries correctly. You need a lesson, which is what we're doing today. Because nobody has to respect your boundary except you, because your boundary is a promise to yourself. It's not a rule for the other person. So there's nothing they need to do differently. But hard feelings come up when somebody isn't doing what we want them to do. And then the narratives come up, right? The narratives of they've never respected me, they've never treated me like an adult, or they've always done this, or they've always been so selfish. They never listened to me. The stories. So before we get into the stories, we got to try to catch it and change it to what do I have control over? Okay, is it real? Says my therapist sister polices everything everyone says. It's so hard to be around her. Yeah, that sounds tough. So then what are you gonna do? Like, what are the ways in which you feel okay interacting with her? right? What are the scenarios? And I said a few of these earlier, but it's like, do you like, is it that you only want to engage with her in group settings? Is it that you only want to text with her or even call her and not see her? Or is it you could even say I only see her for like 30 minutes at a time? Or you could say I only like I don't invite her over because then because if you invite somebody over, maybe they'll stay too long, more longer than you want. So like you only go over to her house and just like stop by for 30 minutes and right? Like these are all things like you got to start thinking creatively. This is actually kind of a creative process. So if you're a creative person, maybe that is a helpful way to think about it. Like it's really creative to start thinking about like how would I feel comfortable interacting with this person? What would feel better for me? Because they're not changing. They're not changing. So even get the idea that they could change out of your head because they're not changing. Because people don't change for other people. Even you don't change for other people. The only time that a person might ask for a change and you change is because and you do decide to make that change is because you think it's what's best for you because you're aligned with that, right? Or because that relationship is safe enough for you or you want to make that change. But the vast majority of relationships aren't that way. That's why we need boundaries. Um, that's not a boundary. I tolerate no disrespect is not a boundary. So I would encourage you to think about something more specific. If you speak to me this way, I'm going to remove myself. Exactly. That's perfect. And you can say that to them, or you just remove yourself, or both, it doesn't because again, they don't need to follow your rule because it's not for them. It's your promise to yourself. So you can say to them, if you speak to me that way, then I'm going to leave. And then if they like keep doing it, you're like, well, bye. Or and you could say that like the first time or you don't have to say that at all. When they start speaking to you that way, you turn around and leave. It's how simple it is. I try to set boundaries about religion with family and they ignore me. Well, Morgan, then you're not setting boundaries correctly because you're asking them to change something. That's not what a boundary is. So it doesn't matter if they ignore you. You're not you got to make promises to yourself about how you handle that, not make rules for them. The ego needs to control others. Exactly. That is so true. Is it real? That is so true. You've nailed it. Yes, see, okay, good. Is it real? You're making rules for them and controlling them. That's not a boundary. Exactly, you've got it. Um, hey AC, good to see you. How would you start a conversation about boundaries? Could you cold open or wait until they do something you don't like? That's a great question. And I think it totally depends on the relationship, to be honest with you. And guess what? That is going to be a messy journey because it's not going to go smoothly. It's not going to go smoothly the majority of the time until you start setting boundaries. Okay, so okay, here's the thing, my dears. The people that we're trying to set boundaries with are inherently people that are inherently people who we can't tell the full truth to, who aren't going to be able to receive our full truth. Because think about it this way, boundaries, when we put a boundary in place, and I've given many examples thus far. When we put a boundary in place, what we're actually doing is putting emotional and physical distance into a relationship. So we're creating space within. So if this is you and this is the other person, We're creating space, physical and emotional space in the relationship. So remember I said like, well, maybe, maybe I don't see my sister. Maybe I just talk to her over the phone or text her, or maybe I don't go over to her house, or maybe, these types of things. That's physical distance. Emotional distance would be like, I don't if this person can't handle emotional conversations, I don't have emotional conversation with them. I don't actually tell them how I feel because they can't handle it. They can't receive it. That'd be emotional distance. So we're putting distance in these relationships, and guess what? That's the opposite of intimacy. Within an intimate relationship, we want to decrease space. We want to come together. We want to decrease emotional and physical distance because we're building intimacy. So inherently, relationships that require boundaries are not going to be super intimate relationships. Some of them can grow into that, but at the time at which you're putting the boundary in place, they're not intimate relationships. So that means inherently, if you're putting space in a relationship, that person can't see, hear, and understand you. You can't tell them the full truth. Because if you could tell them the full truth, like you can ideally in an intimate relationship, you can speak your truth and be heard. You can trust that the other person is going to try to hear you and receive what you're saying, and you'll do the same for them. But do you see how inherently in a relationship where you're creating space and uh, di- where you're creating emotional and physical space and distance, um, inherently in that, you're not going to be able to be seen, heard, and understood. You can't tell your full truth, right? Like you could in an intimate relationship. So why do I bring that up? Because so often we try to have conversations with these people as if they're these people. We try to have intimate conversations where we tell how we feel and we expect to be heard with people who we are not in an intimate relationship with. These people, the people that we're in an intimate relationship with, who can see, hear, and understand us, who can receive what we have to say, who can receive our truth, these are few and far between, by the way. But we're trying to have this type of conversation with these people. And that often doesn't go well because the person is either going to get defensive, they're going to tell you that you're wrong, they're going to tell you that you're making it up, they're going to try to blame you, they're going to try to, deflect. Or on the other side of the spectrum, they might try to like people please or fawn their way out of it because they might just like apologize, but not really get like what the problem is. And so then either of those instances, those people are not ready to receive what you have to say because they're either um trying to just get out of the conversation because they see it as threatening. So, again, doing the behaviors I said, they're going to get defensive or they're going to blame you or they're going to like attack you. Not physically, hopefully, but I mean like attack you, like just attack you verbally. Or they're going to like have a fawn response or a people pleasing response like I'm so sorry. I didn't know, or they're just going to try to do what you want them to do because they're just trying to also get out of the out of the conversation, and they're trying to like make everything okay without actually understanding what the issue is. So see how there's those two types of responses. Both of those people, neither of those people are ready to hear what you have to say. So I would say when you approach a conversation about boundaries with somebody, I mean, know specifically what you're asking and use the nonviolent communication, use I statements, but understand that even if you do the best that you can, it might still not be able to be received. But if it's not able to be received, and if the change doesn't happen that you're looking for, that's when the boundaries actually come in. Like, you don't really need to like have a boundaries conversation. You can have a conversation about a behavior change that you might want to have. And in that case, you got to kind of use your own intuition about when's the right time and those kind of things. But just, as much as you can, understand that it doesn't mean that the change is gonna happen. Hopefully that helps. Any tips for feeling hurt by someone you slept with? Things ended cordially, but you are still thinking about them and the situation. I think you're thinking about them and the situation because you still have unfelt feelings. So you got to feel those feelings. The only way you're really going to be able to move on from a situation like that is if you feel the feelings of hurt or of sadness or of disappointment and you validate them. That's the practice that I've taught multiple times on here. So hopefully you were here at one point, Gorgeous Hearted. Thanks for being here again, by the way. Hold on a second. Okay. People can and do change for themselves and others. You're too young to know this yet, though. Okay, well, that's fine then. Thinking, okay, is it real or is it cake? But I don't want them to talk to me about it anymore. But Morgan, you can't control that. So what you could control is what you do when they bring something up, right? I once asked a friend to stop calling me a certain name and told her I didn't like it, and she did. I saw as she did care enough about our relationship and stopped. Yeah, that's great. That's a person that, that's the type of behavior that, can create less distance and less space. That could possibly be an intimate relationship or at least somebody that's like going in that direction, right? Because that person was able to hear you and was able to receive what you had to say. So those are the relationships that we want to try to hold on to. Those are the relationships of the people in our lives that um that are at the similar place as us, and that we can have some of those hard conversations with and grow together. My guy friend always has some big apology and how valuable I am, then disappears for like a year. After years of disappearing, probably like 4 to 5 times, I am ready to let go. Kind of sad how much I wanted to keep him as a friend for so long. The boundary came at the end of the friendship. I won't respond to him anymore if he tries. Okay. Well, it sounds like you've kind of made up your mind about that. I mean, I would say like if it is somebody that you want to keep in your life, there is a way to do that. I mean, like it's more about setting your expectations. Like are you okay with just having him kind of come in and out? And if not, then yeah, it might be time to take some distance. And if you are okay with that, just kind of setting your own expectations appropriately. But no matter what, feel the sadness, validate the sadness. Claire, weirdly enough, setting boundaries creates respect and intimacy over time. Yes, exactly. And I agree with that because I've had a situation where, there's a lot of situations, probably most, well, I don't want to say like more or most, but I would just say there are going to be some situations where you set boundaries, again, make promises to yourself, and like the other person is just on their own journey. So it's just you're just going to have kind of a distant relationship because you just keep having to put more boundaries. Like you like you kind of maybe try to dip your toe in here or there, but like you've just come to the understanding that distance is better with that person, right? But then there are going to be some people who, again, they might not have been able to like hear you up front, so you added in the distance, but then like over time, it can create a scenario where, because you're showing up more authentically, because basically you're meeting yourself where you're at. and you're meeting them where they're at, quite honestly, but you're meeting yourself where you're at in that scenario because you're honoring what feels most comfortable and supportive for you in that moment. Like how you're going to show up in that relationship at that moment that feels the most comfortable and supportive. So if you say like this person can't handle like how like my emotional needs, so I'm going to like not share that with them. They can't have these emotional conversations. So I'm going to like add that distance. I'm going to take that access away from me, right? I'm not going to tell them how I feel. I'm not going to tell them, intimate details of my life. But over time, it can create a scenario where like you sort of like if that person has demonstrated that they still want to be in your life because they still sort of are respecting your journey and respecting that you've taken space. It's not that they have to respect your boundary because only you have to respect your boundary, but they respect the fact that you've taken space in the relationship. And then over time, because you're showing up for yourself the way that you need, you're feeling your feelings of anger and resentment towards them, perhaps. You're healing the things that you need to heal. They're working on themselves in other ways. Like there actually can, I've had, you know, scenarios where then over time like I actually do start sharing more and it's being received better, more authentically, and so you can come together, but it starts with you being authentic with where you're at now and with where they're at now, right? Yeah, so thank you for saying that, Claire. I don't know if you guys can see that AI summary thing. It says therapist breaks down setting boundaries. I'm not a therapist, by the way. What if you felt the feelings but are still harping on the outcome? Is that just wanting control? Yeah, I think I think it's probably a combination of things, but the I think that the most important thing is that you're disappointed in the outcome. So the feeling is disappointment. You got to feel through that and validate that. Of course I'm disappointed. I wanted it to be different. I thought it was going to be different. I just thought it was interesting that the boundary came at the end versus earlier on. Yeah, I see what you're, uh, hmm. Well, I don't, that's it's an interesting statement because I think, because what I'm hearing is that you're kind of done with the relationship. Like if he's gonna keep showing up like that, it kind of like if he's gonna reach back out, you're not gonna respond. So like how I'm understanding it is that you're actually done with the relationship. So then in that case, like it's not really a boundary because the other thing about boundaries is they're for relationships that you want to keep in your life, right? Like you wouldn't need a boundary if you didn't care if the relation if the person was in your life, you just not have them in your life. You would just stop responding, stop reaching out. And then in that case, it's not really a boundary because you're kind of just letting it go. Boundaries take a lot of intention, and the whole reason why you do it is because you want to keep that person in your life in some capacity, even if it's like a really small capacity. So, yeah, that's kind of what I'm hearing is not from my understanding, it doesn't sound like a boundary anymore. It kind of sounds like you're kind of over the whole thing. Gorgeous hearted, that's tough, like a lost love. I had one of those. I never got over it. Sounds like some people need to feel their feelings. Melita, access to self, vulnerability, and it's like you said, earned and flexible. Exactly, my dear. Yes, I'm done. Oh, so it's not a boundary then. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. And then I'm sure like so much sadness comes with that. That's really sad when that happens, honestly. Like that's happened for me multiple times, and there's a lot of love that you have for friends that have been in your life for so long, and I do think that there's space for relationships to change, and 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 I think, there's been situations for me where like friendships have grown apart, or maybe there was kind of like a situation that happened that was really, like I've tried to have a hard conversation with them that didn't go well, and I've had to, take a step back from that relationship. It doesn't mean that they're fully out of my life. Um, in some cases they are, but in some cases it's just that sometimes as we're growing up and changing and moving in different directions, the same people that were like your people 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago are just not going to be the same people that are going to be the most supportive towards the next version of yourself. And so, again, I said this earlier, that like we as an individual have only so much energy to give towards relationships in general. So we sometimes, when we do make space within those old relationships, and when we do like take the distance, like now we have this much more space that we can give to somebody else. This much more that we've made to invest in maybe somebody else. So, there's friendships that I have where we used to be best friends. And now we might not be like so close, but I still love them and they're still in my life in a small way. We don't hang out or talk all the time, but we still maybe text. And I've had to feel a lot of hard feelings that have come up with those scenarios, because it is, I think, more than anything, it's also a recognition of your own closing of chapter, like your own, like a death of a past version of yourself, of who you were, and recognizing that you're somebody different now, and that person doesn't quite fit in the same way, but you still have so much love for them. So it's hard and it hurts and it's sad. And so I encourage you to truly like feel and validate that those feelings and that experience, whether they stay in your life or not, whether they stay in your life or not. But I do think sometimes we need to give a little bit more space to some of the gray area, where if you do love that person, if you have the history with that person, sometimes it's okay to let the relationship change, and maybe only like text with them occasionally here or there, and so that it doesn't have to be like we're totally done with them, because like we can't have the same relationship that we like, they're not showing up for us in this way, so like we're kind of just done with them and we don't want them in our lives anymore. It can be that way, and again, that's happened for me as well, but more so just in the sense of like the relationships just kind of like run its course, and I'm not even angry anymore. I think if you're still kind of angry or resentful, or if you got any of that kind of like resistance energy, the frustration, then it might be good to feel through that before making any decision. But sometimes if you just know you're done, you're done. But either way, you've got to show up for yourself and feel the hard feelings that come up. Just yeah, sounds like yeah. Wait. Difficult for distancing from a friend in a friend group too. Yes, difficult but not impossible. Yes, I totally love him, but I've communicated so clearly so much and he feels so off to me now. No energy for that anymore. I did the same dance with him for 15 years. I hear you. Yeah, so then you gotta, well, Purple Hearts, you gotta feel through that. It's not, see, the thing is, it's not really about their behavior. It's about what their behavior is bringing up for you and telling you about yourself. Like, that's always the case with any relationship. It's triggering something within you, or it's activating something in you. And that's telling you something about yourself. That's valuable information. And the truth is, I mean, from what I'm hearing you say, if you say you're shocked, if you're saying you're shocked, then you still have feelings to feel. And I would say feel those before making any final decision. But again, it's you got to do what's best for you. But if you're shocked, it means that you haven't, it means that in you telling him and you trying to have those hard conversations with him, that there is an expectation on your part that he did something different. Because if you're shocked, like that's the thing. I feel like whenever, it's been like done with a friend, I'm never shocked. Like I'm always just like sad because I know it's done. But like shock kind of kind of means to me like you're shocked that like he still is doing the same, having the same behaviors. Um Tells me that maybe there's an expectation that he might change. So it might be good to explore that for yourself, but do what's best for you. But my dears, I think I'm gonna sign off here for this evening. Thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna be back on next tu Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. And I love you so much. I hope that was helpful. You're welcome, my dear. And I hope you have a great week until next week. Hopefully you can join then. And oh, hey, Sunny. You're welcome, gorgeous hearted. And sending you lots of love and light. Bye, my dears.